Hello and welcome to this episode of Swordpoint Stories. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about momentum. One mechanic in the game of Swordpoint is that each player has a pool of momentum tokens. These tokens may be spent to influence key parts of the action, such as during the movement phase and the combat phase. In a standard game, each player starts with a pool of 5 momentum tokens. You can use anything to represent this, such as beads, coins, chits. One way of earning momentum tokens is during the shooting phase. In this example, we had a unit of 4 skirmishing bases. During shooting, they lost 2 casualties, so had to remove a base. 2 casualties was enough to inflict 10% casualties on the unit, which means they are discouraged. Discouraging an opposing unit through shooting would normally gain you 1 momentum token. However, this only applies to form units, so you don't get a momentum token for discouraging skirmish units. The skirmish unit lost 2 casualties out of a total of 8. This is equal to at least 25% of the current base strength of the unit, so it must take an immediate cohesion test. Causing an opposing unit to take a cohesion test for shooting casualties gains the player 1 momentum token. Momentum tokens can also be awarded in the movement phase. If your unit successfully charges into an enemy unit, you gain 1 token. If your impetuous unit successfully charges into an enemy, then that's worth 2 tokens. If an enemy unit fled from your charge, but you could not contact it, you would gain 1 token. Note that tokens are not awarded for units that countercharge, only those units that charge. You may also gain momentum tokens during the combat phase. If you reduce an enemy unit to or below half strength, you are awarded 2 tokens. If your unit runs down a unit that fled or evaded its charge, then you'd gain 3 tokens. Finally, tokens are awarded as a result of combat. If your unit wins a round of combat without forcing the enemy back, or wins but is unable to follow up, you gain 1 token. If you force an enemy unit to take a break test, that's another token. If your unit follows up an enemy that it has forced to fall back in combat, you'd gain 2 tokens. If your unit breaks its enemy and forces it to flee, that's 3 tokens. If your unit runs down in pursuit a unit it was in combat with and which broke and ran due to cohesion test, not a break test, then you'd get 1 token. At the start of the movement phase, players dice to see who has seized the initiative by rolling a d6. Players can spend momentum tokens in order to increase their dice score, with each token increasing the score by +1. Players are allowed to allocate up to 3 tokens at this stage. Tokens are hidden and then revealed simultaneously before rolling the dice. Any tokens spent are lost. At the start of combat, each player can spend up to 3 momentum tokens, with each token counting as a +1 bonus in combat resolution. If there are several combats to be fought, the tokens for each combat should be revealed before any combats are adjudicated, in the order decided by the player holding the initiative. Remember that as all combats are resolved simultaneously, tokens awarded at the end of one combat cannot be used in another combat resolved after it, but in the same turn. Likewise, tokens are awarded per combat, and the number of units in the combat is irrelevant. The errata for version 2 of the rules now limits the size of the momentum pool for each player. During the initial phase, players discard any surplus momentum tokens down to a maximum of 12. If you hold any surplus momentum tokens at the end of the game, then these can be worth additional victory points. The normal rule is 10 points for each 3 tokens held. If you're looking to play some Swordpoint in the UK, then there is an event on the 5th and 6th of October at Big Battles in Cirencester. It'll be using armies from the Chariot Armies book, up to 1,250 points. Thank you for watching this episode of Swordpoint Stories.